we'll get started.
Okay, so here?
Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, is this?
Yep.
Okay. It's a little bit intimidating to talk in front of a camera like this. Okay.
Oh, it's on.
It is on. Closer? Oh, okay. Thank you. So this will be posted online for anyone who has missed this session. So as there are new volunteers, they can watch the video. We'll also post the PowerPoint presentation so they can read through that. So I won't be reading through every word on every slide today, but anyone who's looking at this online can read that to themselves, and hopefully you can all read this and see this as we're here as well. So let's begin. As I look out, most of the volunteers here have been here before, have volunteered here for many years, so this will be nothing new for you this morning, and a few new faces. So this is a training that we do every year, just as a refresher and to remind ourselves of some important things before we start our new ministry year. As we look at our new ministry year and all the programs starting, there are a lot of things that we're thinking about generally. We're thinking about, okay, who's volunteering where, how are we covering this, what's my lesson for today? But we always do need to also be thinking about the safety of the children and youth in our programs as well. So it needs to be sort of part of our general mindset as we go in to our programs. So not only safety within our programs, but a consciousness of what potentially may be happening at home and outside of our programs as well, and some signs to look for. So that's what we'll be kind of talking through today. This is the same PowerPoint we've used for quite a few years, so you'll all find it repetitive and pretty recognizable from that. So we'll walk through this, and then we'll get into some discussions and scenarios and really try to work through any questions you may have about this issue. So. All right. So the main premise of having a plan to protect program is that we are trying to provide a safe space for children and youth in our programs. So this is a mandate really from, as believers, that we have from God, that we are treasuring our children and our youth and that we're protecting them. So Matthew 18:5 and 6 here. So just one of the verses that talks about the value of children and youth and how Jesus saw them and sort of our responsibility. And this phrase always sort of gets me. So if a child is abused outside the church, they often can question the existence of God. But if they are abused within the church, that then becomes their view of God. And that's something that's really hard to change later in life, right? That we are the examples of God's love to anyone in our programs. And so that's something that we need to keep in mind in all our interactions with youth and children who we're with, and any vulnerable person who's in our program as well. Our responsibility and moral as well comes into being the voice for those who don't necessarily have a voice, and being able to speak for someone who can't necessarily speak up. As well as it being our ethical and our Christian responsibility, it's also part of our legal responsibility to have a plan in place to protect children and anybody who's coming into our programs. So I'll read this one. So ensuring that our organization is a safe place for children is not just a good idea, it's a legal requirement. So organizations have a legal responsibility to ensure that a plan for protection is in place, and insurance companies also require the same level of diligence to provide financial coverage. So it is something that we are mandated to do, to have some kind of plan and policies that we are abiding by in our programs to protect our children and to protect ourselves as well. Okay, so if a court finds that your group could have done more to ensure safety of people in your programs, we could be found vicariously liable. So the actions of a member or clergy or a layperson or a volunteer, so anyone, not just church leadership, anyone involved with the programs, your best protection against vicarious liability is screening. So that's what they have found. And we do have a screening process for volunteers that we go through for any new volunteers coming into our programs as well. So why are churches vulnerable places for abuse? We ask this question every year. We always get some great answers. What makes churches a vulnerable place for children and youth to come to, or for adults as well? Yeah. Okay, an assumed level of trust, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Anything else? I think that's probably one of the biggest ones, is that, you know, it's a safe place. You kind of just think it's a safe place. Parents or family members kind of let their guard down. You sort of don't think that this could happen here, and unfortunately, we know that abuse can happen anywhere.
We also kind of have a mandate to accept anybody, right? So we're just so excited when new faces come in that we do confirm things with these kind of screen.
Yes, so because we're an open and welcoming environment, that can be part of it. And we want to be open and welcoming. And so then sometimes, you know, and often we're looking for the help in our programs. Oh, sure, absolutely, you can help in a program. Sure, we need volunteers, we need help. But that's where that screening process does come into place as well. Mm-hmm. All right, so just some general definitions for us. So a definition for child abuse is child abuse refers to an act committed by a parent, caregiver, or a person in a position of trust, which would be anyone here volunteering in a program. We are sort of in a position to be trusted. Even though he or she may not care for the child on a daily basis, which is not accidental and which harms or threatens the child's physical, mental health or their well-being. So that covers a lot of bases there. Some different categorizations for abuse. So physical, sexual, emotional, and neglect is in there as well. So physical abuse is probably something we're a little bit more familiar with in a way, especially since the signs tend to be more obvious to us or more visual. But any kind of deliberate physical force or actions that would injure a child. So there's some examples there: slapping, shaking, those kinds of things. So a few signs of physical abuse. You can see a few of them there. I know we've had discussions here and there about physical signs of abuse, in the sense that, you know, my 3-year-old often has bruises all over him, and he is simply a rambunctious little boy who jumps everywhere and falls continuously. And so we know that there will be some natural bruises and scratches that children get that are completely innocent and explained, but just something to be aware of. I know my child care provider, anytime I sent my son to child care last week, and I went to pick him up, and she said, he has a bruise on his cheek. I didn't notice it till this afternoon. I said, oh, no, that happened at home. That wasn't you. She said, oh, okay, good. I didn't know. I just saw it. But it's something that we're all sort of conscious about, and something to just be aware of. Emotional abuse can be a bit tougher to see at times, but there are some signs of that as well. So emotional abuse can consist of things like constant criticizing, teasing, belittling, insulting. Ignoring is part of that as well. It also includes a failure of a parent or caregiver to provide children with love and emotional support and guidance. So maybe something that we wouldn't always know about. We wouldn't see necessarily that part of a child's life to know some of those things when they're with us. So a few symptoms of that: withdrawing, nervousness, fear, a rejection of certain people, not being comfortable in certain situations, and acting inappropriately. Acting inappropriately could be could mean a lot of different things for different individual. All right, and then sexual abuse as well, which includes quite a few different things in there, if you want to read through this slide. And some signs of sexual abuse are listed here as well. So some of the similar symptoms with emotional abuse as well, so the withdrawing from people, the fear and nervousness as well, and some additional ones, some sexual self-consciousness, some play acting, things like that, that could be tips that something is going on. Not necessarily that something's going on, but could be some signs to us. And neglect as well. So again, neglect can cover a lot of different things, and sometimes we don't think of neglect as part of being abuse, but it really is considered part of abuse. So neglecting to meet basic needs, food, shelter, those kinds of things, medical attention, education, protection from harm, and sometimes it's a knowledge deficit as well from family members or whoever the caregiver is. Sometimes it's just simply a knowledge thing. All right. So, because screening is one of the main protections we have as far as protecting our children in our programs, we want to make sure that you know what our process is here for volunteers. So we do have a 6-month waiting rule before someone can start volunteering in a program with children or youth, and an application for them to fill out as well. There are 3 references included in that application for us to call and just, get information. Oh, sorry, thank you. To get information from many of you. You've been here for a long time. You've volunteered here for a long time, so we're not checking your references every year. At some point, they were likely checked, but for new volunteers, we're doing that. We all do have to get our vulnerable sector police checks completed as well, and so you will get information about that when yours has expired and when you need to renew that police check. We do a short interview just with your program director, and our training, which is this training that we have every year, and ultimately a board approval from the Deacon Board on our list of volunteers for our programs. All right, so this is the part that we all kind of get a little bit nervous about if we've seen some signs or have some concerns, what do we need to do about that? So in Canada, the Child and Family Services Act states that anyone with a reasonable suspicion of child abuse has the legal responsibility to report that suspicion. So then they have some tips for talking to a child about that to get more information. So don't ask leading questions, and comfort the child without making promises. So one of the things that we've been told repeatedly, don't make a promise like, I won't tell anybody about our conversation. If it is something that you have concerns about, you will have to tell somebody. So don't make that promise to a child. That can really destroy trust when you do end up having to tell somebody. And also, don't ask leading questions. Try to get the information that you need to get, but try not to lead a child to say something. That can be really difficult to do. Does anyone have experience with having to do that and navigating that you want to share? That can be really, really tough, and to try to decipher what really is going on, and sometimes you get a different story than what reality is from children. So it can be a really tough thing to sort of walk through. Inform leadership if there's an issue or concern that you have. So I would be talking probably to Matt initially, and then we would go through calling Child and Youth or Child Protective Services, and making a case with them, and then they follow through their investigation and their steps. All right, and confidentiality is extremely important there for who we are considering the victim and who's accused as well. That it's not something that we want to be gossiping about or talking to other people about. It really is something that we need to try to be really protective with. All right, so we do have our Emmanuel's risk management policy manual. Has anybody read it? A few people. That was a bonus question. I don't have any prize for you if you've read the manual. But it actually is quite, I was reading through it last night because I couldn't sleep, and and it was actually quite, and it's good to really remind ourselves of some of the policies that we have that we don't necessarily, that we're not necessarily thinking about on a normal basis, or just some good reminders to us as well. So another verse from Ezekiel there, that we provide a safe space for our children and youth to come. So there are, as I was reading through the policies, again, I know there's usually a few that we try to remind you of every year, just so that we have a reminder going into the program year. I know we always talk about the open door policy, so especially with regard to like the Sunday school classrooms down here, that we have 2 leaders in the rooms, and when there's not 2 leaders in the room, like if one leader has to go out for an emergency, that we leave the door open so that there can be a visual line of sight. In the toddler room, because they tend to be runners, we just open the top of the door, otherwise you will have them everywhere. So just having that visual sight so that at any point somebody, an adult could look in and still have a visual on what's going on there. The other policy I know that we've talked about before is that the two leaders, if there's only 2 leaders, then we don't want them to be from the same family or married. We need them to be from different families. That's just a legal thing. If one of the volunteers is under 16, then they do need to have an adult volunteer with them as well, with the children. And then some of the ratios, again, that I'll go over are infants. So it's one leader for every 3 infants, 1 leader for every 4 toddler or preschool age child, 1 leader for every 7 to 10 elementary age child, and then 1 leader for every 10 youth. And I know youth has a few more requirements as far as ratios, boy to girl ratios as well. And Matt can answer some of those questions if you have any about that. Trying to think if there's one other policy I was thinking. We have adopted the stance as far as infants that we don't change diapers. We have diaper changing stations, but that we will we'll contact the parent to come and change diapers, and so we've kind of sort of gotten out on that. We shouldn't really have any programs where an infant is left with us where their parent isn't on premises, so that's how we're dealing with diaper changing. And we do have the hall monitor system that we adopted last year to have that additional support so that somebody is sort of out in this area or available, especially if a child needs to go to the washroom and needs assistance with the washroom, so that one of the adults, so in an ideal world, the hall monitor will stand outside of the bathroom door and be able to be sort of another visual person there for the leader if the leader is required in the bathroom. So that's kind of how we've addressed bathroom runs, which typically happens in the 2 rooms over there, the toddler room and the JKSK room. And then a physical touch. So Amy, we just ask that it's age appropriate. So again, what I would do with my 3-year-old as far as physical touch would be different from what I would do with a 15-year-old in youth. So just be conscious of sort of appropriate physical boundaries that you have. Even if the child or youth aren't abiding by those boundaries, it's still our responsibility as the responsible person to try to get those get the physical touch back to where those boundaries should be. So even if someone goes in for a hug and you say, no, we're just doing high fives today or something, I know I see a few smiles, so I know we've had some experience with that as well as trying to establish some appropriate guidelines with children and youth. All right, so I was hoping Matt would be here for the discussion time. Any questions or discussion? I think he had some examples he was going to bring. Sure, you can come up to the mic. Oh.
I found that.
Guess I got right to the 9:30 mark, didn't I?
That's okay. I got it. Okay. All done?
All right, yep, so we'll look for some scenarios or,
Sure, yep. Did we just do questions?
yep, so no questions right now, but they may come
Okay.
out of the discussions. at the
Good.
beginning.
Okay, so I just thought, that's close enough. So some scenarios that I've come across or heard of in the past or through grapevine, if you want to call it that. Microphone? Okay. Some scenarios I've heard of or wonder what you guys would think of this. I put, you notice that a grade 8, and again, we've been trained obviously for children and youth. Let's just say, for example, you notice a grade 8 girl who's volunteering her class and she looks like she has, this is going 0 to 100 really quickly. Let's say you notice a volunteer that looks like she's had some kind of cutting or some kind of like physical harm, that she's been harming herself. I think it's just a good thing to be able to talk about what would be some of our steps to start to, not remedy necessarily, but to make sure that she's looked after. What do you guys think? So again, we notice a volunteer, could be a boy or a girl, let's say grade 8-ish, and we notice that they've been harming. What would you guys start to think about in that? Yeah, Georgina?
First of all, I would make sure what you think it is what's really, she could have fallen on a fence or something. Like, you gotta really make sure what you think it is before you leave the head to step two. And, you know, oh, how are you doing today? What's going
Yeah.
on? And, not leave the head. Sometimes you've had this at work where people get excited sometimes when if there's an accident they have or something and then everybody's really there.
So it's a good thing just
Really establish
to,
first.
to clarify and establish if what we think is happening actually happened. And sometimes I think in those conversations they might not tell you the truth, but I think that's part of due diligence is start and open a conversation in a safe way.
The story will change in 5 minutes if it isn't accurate.
Sure. Yep. And that might be where it's valuable too if there's other people that have come across it. If you hear the same story every time or it's changed a little bit, yeah. If anybody's had experience or any other input, what you do with something like that. Because I think there's not always a black and white answer to it, but I think hearing how we would start to process it can be valuable. So what else do you guys think?
And there may be another leader who has already built trust and rapport with this volunteer, and they may be someone to, kind of ask and say, hey, I noticed this, what do you think? Or maybe they're the one to talk to.
Yeah.
That person because they have more trust built.
So maybe looking at other people that are resources that know them better. Yep. Anything else to add, Dana? Yep.
One of the things that I came across was like students who are cutting, they like when they're stressed, that's what they tend to do. So I had a student who was like, she grabbed like a staple and was like, I'm really stressed, and she started to like kind of pick at herself with it, and that it's like a sign, right? So you kind of pick up on like what are they doing when they're stressed or that kind of thing. It kind of like gives some hints.
Yeah, so in summary, sometimes it's a way cutting or self-harm could be there could be a sign. I'm just trying to summarize it okay, good. I think it's also important that if anything is out of the ordinary that we see, that we take notes of it, of who we spoke to, when we saw it happen. I think just it's never ever a bad thing to have written or typed out notes, just in case. I mean, I think it's also important that we deal with it ASAP. Like, it's not something that we think, oh, it's a long weekend and it's Thursday afternoon and I'll deal with it Monday or Tuesday. Because sometimes, obviously, unfortunately, it can be life and death. Or the other thing that I've dealt with personally is I've dealt with a case of is parents saying you knew about this and you didn't talk to me sooner. So I think those are just important. Would anybody else add anything experience-wise or anything to add? think it's important that we also just, number one, we're thinking about the health and the well-being of the student. So the one thing I've also known is we can't promise. One girl that she'd been cutting, she said to me, "Don't tell my parents. You have to promise you don't tell my parents." I said, "I can't promise anything. There's no promising." So I've got a couple other, but is there any other questions, points, things that come up? All right, this is a fun one, and I don't necessarily know the answer, but it would be a good one that we can all talk through, because I'm sure it's happened. A grade 2 student poops their pants, and parents are not in the church to deal with it. I don't know if my children aren't in grade 2 yet, so I don't know if that's something that generally. But we do realize that it's something that parents aren't around, and that's naturally where I think I would say, okay, this is your realm.
Call 911.
Wendy suggests call 911, and I think we should look otherwise. Yeah, Jen?
I don't know. I would think that you would probably get a hold of the parents and let them know just because of the age. It's not typical, probably. And,
Yeah.
you know, they could be sick and
Yeah.
control themselves. So I would probably.
So Jen just says it's important to make sure we contact parents, and because they could be sick or something could be going on. And the fact is, 99% of the time we should have, or we always need to have phone numbers and contact information on file. Not necessarily for that, but in case that were to happen too. What about like embarrassment fact? Like if a grade 2, I'm sure there's a sense of it's a bit of an embarrassing thing. So do we take them away on their own somewhere? Do we just continue on like nothing's happened wrong? What do you guys think? And again, I'm not saying it's black and white. I'm just wondering if we can think through it. Yeah, Gil? Yeah.
Where we actually have a bag that's for clothing.
Okay.
So we could say that to grade 2 child, go and use some paper towels, as clean as you can. Here's a bag, put your dirty things in, and here, put these on for the rest of the day.
Sure. So Gail just said there's a bag. From her experience in times past, there's been a bag just in case something like this were to happen. And we could give them the option to go away and clean themselves up. But I think, yeah, the most important thing is we contact mom and dad. And then...
happened to us years ago when I was in grade 3.
It happened to you.
No, they ran out of dresses.
Sure.
They had to wear dresses and they got so, well, it was more for the girls, I guess, but
Yeah.
anyway, I luckily was able to stand in my wet pants. It was like we were on the public. It was at public school.
Right.
They had to change the clothes. I like that idea.
Yep.
Something to try to hold.
Yep.
I don't know.
One thing I will share just from
Yep.
personal experience as well is, depending on the circumstances, it's important for teachers to be aware, and if they say they need to go to the bathroom, it's not, wait a minute, it's let them go.
Sure. Yep. And that is what's important too, is we realize we don't have a perfect system down here of waiting for a hall monitor every 5 to 7 minutes to rotate through. We talked about, especially down here, I think grade 4-5 class is generally pretty good at monitoring their bowels. But the younger kids, it might be valuable sometimes. We talked about taking a bathroom break where everybody walks to the bathroom together. Or if worst comes to worst, and sometimes you can smell it coming ahead of time, that you just really say, okay, we're going to leave the door open and a helper is going to go there. And even if you can find one other adult, just to say, come watch, as weird as that sounds, it's important to have somebody who can corroborate, if that's the right word, what we're doing. So, any other comments, questions? Rachel, I think Harker's awake. I tried. Monitor's right here. Real life. Okay. Anything else to add to that, sorry? We're talking. I think the worst case scenario is actually, and this sounds totally opposite, I assume, of what we think we want to help out, is to actually start taking clothes off the child, obviously. So unless I think, like, if they're family related somehow, don't know for sure, I could get back to you on that, but. Okay, here's third one. You notice another teacher getting into a seemingly over-the-top verbal altercation with a grade 6 boy. I mean, like, you can tell when there's times when it's like you're talking and the child is listening, but if there's a back and forth, and from experience, there's times when we lose our cool, right? Like as adults and kids. So what would you do if you came across Karen is just letting Simon Keller have it? I just saw two close families, so. Or Eli, whoever it is. What do we, in a nice way, like how would we just let it go? Because we've come to realize there's different kinds of abuse as well. What would we, Dana, yep?
I maybe ask, I don't know, either the adult or the student, like, do you want to, like, if the adult, maybe you want to go for a walk, right? And I'll talk to the student.
Sure.
Or say to the student, why don't you come for a walk with me? Or I'm, the homeowner, maybe you can just so that everyone gets a breather.
Mm-hmm.
You can't make the situation well if you're really worked up.
Sure.
On either side.
Yep. We do that often, as you can see. It's good to be able to trade off with someone if you realize, like, my emotions have gotten so high to the point where I might not be able to do this on my own. So I think that is valuable. Yeah. Yep, Marie.
I can deal with both individuals, but I'd say maybe we should both count to 10. Give them a little chance to realize who's back and
Okay. Yeah, so just, it might be valuable to be able to count it out, take some time, breathe. Okay. Anything else to add to that? And then we'll have our last point, and then we can open it up to more questions, possibly.
I think we need to realize that we're human, right?
Right.
We're not perfect, and we will make mistakes, and there are times we'll have to apologize to a child, and that they'll need to apologize to us, and we can just try to do the best we can and give each other breaks, and try to see where you are. Right? If I'm coming into a Sunday school class and I'm already in a bad mindset, it's probably going to be a bad class.
Yeah.
So leaning on other volunteers and teachers as well can help.
Well, and that's what I've sometimes with youth. I think it's important along those lines to say, if you've had a bad day, or if you've had, everybody has really bad days or bad days. It's important if we have, because most of the time here we have you working with one other person at least, and if not, the door is open. But regardless, if there's one other person and they already know that your day's been long and emotional, I think it's even valuable, like you're a team working together, to be able to share that with that person and say, if it looks like my fuse is short, it is. So it's valuable to step in and help me out.
And that's not a threat.
No, it's not a threat. Anything else to add to that?
Sometimes it doesn't hurt to let the children know that in the class.
Yeah.
I've got a really bad weekend, and
Yep.
just let the kids know, and that helps them to understand.
I think there's value, like you say, to vulnerability, to the point where kids understand where you're coming from. Yeah. And then who knows, they might be able to relate to you better too, because they might have had a bad week. So yeah. Okay, finally, so I think Karen talked about this, I heard in passing, and this is something that I don't know if there's a right answer. There is a right answer, I suppose, but you see bruising on a grade 3 girl that doesn't seem to be accidental. What do you ask her, and do you allow her parents to pick her up at the end of the night? Say it's Awana or some kind of, what do you do? Because I think, again, it could be a gray area here, but what would be our protocols? Again, that makes it sound scientific, but I mean, just in your head, what do we do when you see bruising and you suspect that it might be from home or someone that's close to them? Do you throw your body in the way of harm and say no? Or what would your steps be in the process? Yeah, Kim? Yeah, it's open to anybody for conversation, yep. And I'll just try and summarize what you say for the...
I would say it can't be abused unless it's repeated.
Okay.
So it's a one-time thing.
It can't be abused unless it's repeated,
Well,
yeah?
I'm just saying, like, you can't say it is unless you, it's repeated. Like, it could be abused, but, like, you don't know. So I would say you ask them a question, what happened to, I see you have a little bruise here, what happened? Don't say anything about, did somebody do this or that? Just see what they have to answer.
Yeah.
Try to, obviously you can't write it down in the moment, but remember what they said, write it down later.
Yeah.
If they literally said it was a parent, I guess then you have to can
Yeah.
discuss that. But I was saying if they make an excuse or something, it's more you have to let the SCCS take
Yeah.
care of it if you don't physically see them.
So conversation and communication. But one thing that I've learned as well through this in the past is you can't ask, it's important not to ask leading questions. Did your mom do this to you? Or because sometimes then that can direct their mind toward just saying yes. And again, not that kids are all liars, but there's times when they say yes to everything or they say no to everything. So I think it's important to be writing notes. Again, I asked on this date, and I wrote down on this date, like if you have a pattern of what you've seen happening. And then that's also valuable to take to, again, other colleagues or volunteers, or to me, who I hope that you would come to. No, you have to. You actually would have to come to me. Especially, I would say myself or Paul, and say, I've noticed this, because who knows, it might have been me that did something, and so you'd want to go to Paul. But there is a sense of, not anonymity, but you can't, like, it's a really touchy subject that you can't just be suggesting things to kids, because, yeah, sometimes what kids say we know isn't true, but we have to look for truth, so. I know a lot of you guys have experience with group homes or with school. What else would you guys say? Dana?
Yeah, I think it's just also important to it was really helpful for me listening to a seminar from FNCS workers, and just that, like, even if you are reporting, it doesn't mean extreme things will happen to their family.
Sure.
Right? Like, FNCS, they want families to stay together. It's important to them that parents and kids are united. And so just, like, feeling a bit more calm.
Sure.
If you do have to call them, it doesn't mean that that's going to make every single thing in their life change, right? That they need information. Like if they're getting a call from the church and they're getting a call from the school and they're getting a call, then that's when they will start to act.
Yeah.
But like it doesn't mean right away.
Yeah.
There's going to be a huge.
So in summary, what Dana is saying is don't feel afraid if you have a hesitate, like don't hesitate, because when you call FNCS, they're not going to just take the children away right away. They want to see families come together. So reporting it doesn't mean the end of the world. You're not separating the family for life. I think that's a summary. Anything else to add right now? Or is there any other questions that come up? Again, I don't call myself the best. Like this isn't my, I have to check it often and ask other colleagues, and I'm a part of a youth group a youth group support system of people. So I often ask, what do I do if? With social media, especially, some of you guys are on social media, there's kids that are messaging you sensitive things on Instagram, not Facebook anymore, on Instagram. iMessage, like a kid doesn't need a phone number to be able to text you. If they find out your phone number, there's ways of contacting you as well. So there's less and less that seemingly is black and white today of how we deal with this stuff. So the rules of thumb that I often rely on are like keeping a record of everything. That might seem anal, but just keeping a record of it, because it'll keep you safe and the child safe, hopefully, as well. So, any other questions, comments that comes to mind? All right. Well, I guess, sorry. Yep.
If any of us need background checks or any paperwork, how do we?
Good call. So that might be the one thing I didn't prepare or bring over. There was, and I might ask Melissa if we have them or not. So cool, we do. So Melissa will put these somewhere. So essentially, we are trying to update our records, and please don't take this personally. I said this for our Awana volunteers already. Please don't take it personally if you're like, I already did all this. Why am I doing it again? We've tried to streamline it down to 2 pieces of paper. If you walk out of here, there's a screening application thing that more or less gives a profile on you, that we just want to know who you are, where you've served before. So this is, again, some of you might have helped build this church, and you might say, this is silly, why am I filling this out? But just humor me for a while, fill it out, and if there's some of us that have been only serving in the last 2 or 3 years, please, it's especially for you, or that you've just started this year, And there's 2 references in the bottom. And again, these are people, if you read on there, that we've served with. That just, and again, if you hear, oh, Matt called them, it isn't because I question you at all. It's just because it's good to know from other people, like, hey, what are they good at? Where might they be, like, where can I challenge them in? That's a nicer way of saying what aren't they as good at? But yeah, just being able to talk to other people. So you can drop off the screening or the application to myself. You can put it in my mailbox. You can, if you want to scan it and email it to me, just please get it to my hands. Except for if it's a youth night or an Awana night and you see me running around and you just pass it off, please don't do that because I lose stuff. Also, there's just, if you live in Wellington or Waterloo County region, there's to get a police check done, a vulnerable sector check, there's just a piece of paper there. You'll take it, you'll fill it out, and you'll take it what is it, in Cambridge. It's right near Sports World. That's where the main police station is. I haven't heard yet from people if we found out online or if there's somewhere more local you can get that done. So there's the one in Fergus and Sports World. So the best thing about Waterloo one and like Waterloo Region Sports World, I know for sure, is you take it there and within a half an hour, you're done. So again, come talk to me after, or sorry, Craig?
The Waterloo one, we went there and they just send you away and this is how you do it online.
Okay.
I haven't tried it yet, but...
Sure. So I know for sure that if you want to get it done and you live in Waterloo Region anywhere, you take it right to Sports World, the one on Maple whatever it is, Maple Grove, I think. And they'll get it done usually within a half an hour. So,
And that's every 5 years.
every 5 years that needs to be updated. And I think it's free, and if it's not, just keep your receipt and we'll reimburse you. Otherwise, any other questions or comments? Please, just I guess the most important thing is, if anything ever happens that you have questions about, contact myself or Paul, and Paul might redirect you toward me. But just talk to me and keep a record of stuff because that just keeps everybody safe. So I'm going to pray unless there's other questions, and then we'll go from there.